Greetings and welcome to Profneel once again. It's a pleasure to have you here. Today is 31st December 2021. So wishing you very many best wishes for the new year ahead. And Profneel Friday, there's got to be a story. And the story for the day, 1971 in the war for Bangladesh, liberation of East Pakistan, India's Abhimanyu and Jayadrath in the western sector. Abhimanyu and Jayadrath, you would ask, why? Aren't they the characters in the Mahabharata? Yes, absolutely. What are they doing here? Correct? What are they doing here? But at times I wonder whether was it not the Kurukshetra being replayed again in the western sector in 1971 with Abhimanyu and Jayadrath in the same army in different bodies, in a different time, on a different war field. Interesting, isn't it? Well, Abhimanyu, the boy soldier we all know very well, who got caught in Chakravyuha and died heroically, a hero's death. And Jayadrath, the warrior who had got a boon from Shiva, the Mahadev, that he could stop the Pandavas for one day in a war, and did so, stopping the Pandavas from entering the Chakravyuha, thereby isolating Abhimanyu to be on his own inside the Chakravyuha. Abhimanyu died on the 13th day of the war, and so did, somewhere close to the 13th day, so did our Abhimanyu in this reference to context. So let's go to the Abhimanyu first. The paramvirchakra awardee, posthumous, the hero of the Battle of Basantar, Second Lieutenant Arun Khetrapal, paramvirchakra, posthumous, commissioned in 1971, born to battle as that course calls itself, and they rightly so, because they're pitchforked, not even commissioned, they're pitchforked straight into the war after being commissioned. He was commissioned into the Pune Horse, the 17 Pune Horse of the Armored Corps in the Indian Army. On the 16th of December, almost the last day of the war, that is almost the 13th day of the war. See the comparison, Abhimanyu and Khetrapal. The tanks assigned the objective of establishing a bridgehead across the river Basantar. But on the bridge, the Pakistanis had laid mines, and their armor was waiting opposite the bridge. And they had put a smoke screen, and they were advancing on our side. Seeing this, Khetrapal and two other tanks went to engage them. Lieutenant Alawat got injured. So the Khetrapal and two other tanks only, they got 10 Pakistani tanks. Imagine 3 tanks getting the better of 10 tanks, Pakistani tanks. But in the midst of this, Khetrapal's tank got fire. No, sir, I refuse to abandon my tank. My main gun is still working, and I'll get these bastards. That was his reply to his senior officer, who asked him to abandon his tank. He refused to do so. He got another tank, 100 meters away. But in the midst of this all, another Pakistani shell hit his tank, and the tank was totally burning now. Yet he continued undeterred and died a hero's death, burned in his own tank. But he chose not to abandon his task. He chose not to abandon his tank. Like Abhimanyu chose not to run away from Chakravyuha. He could have done that easily. But if you recall that lovely visual of Abhimanyu in the Amar Chitra Katha, holding the chariot wheel in his hand as the sun is setting, that's the only weapon he has in his hand. But with pride he picks it up and battles against the great Adhirathis and the Mahamarathis with astras. Alone, that boy soldier. Likewise, Arun Khetrapal in the western sector. Alone, burning in the tank, yet managing to get a couple of Pakistani tanks, undeterred by the fire, undeterred by his state that what will happen to me, refusing to abandon his tank. So that is the hero of the Battle of Basantar, our Abhimanyu, Second Lieutenant Arun Khetarpal, posthumous paramvirchakra. He deserves that, of course, if envy does. Our Jayadrath, fighting in the same army, as I said, of Abhimanyu, the hero of the Battle of Longewalla. Remember the film Border, made on the Battle of Longewalla? Longewalla, incidentally, the graveyard of 37 enemy tanks. Now, Sunny Deol, he played the role of Major Chandrapur of the Punjab, 23 Punjab. Major Chandrapur also later was promoted as brigadier and was honored with the mahavirchakra. His task: do not let the enemy pass through Longewalla. So they received information on the 4th and the 5th of December that a huge formation of enemy tanks and infantry were advancing towards his place, where he was located. And the formation, one brigade of infantry, that's about 4,000, 5,000 men, soldiers, and one regiment of tanks. That's almost about 45 tanks. No, so I'm sorry, 25 tanks. Almost about 25 tanks. And what did our Jayadrath, Major Chandrapur, have in hand? He had a company of men, 2 recoilless guns, which are normally used mounted on a jeep as anti-tank guns, a couple of mortars, and the ammunition that men carry. That's all. But how did they manage to stop that night, the enemy, not to let them through? Remember that pep talk that the major delivers to his men, stirring their emotions, that today is the day when we have to prove, we have to pay our debt to the nation. And that worked. Also working in the favor was the major, going from trench to trench, throughout the night, egging his men on to take on the enemy. In the thick of fire, he did all this. Besides all this, there was the barbed wire. The barbed wire which was built to keep the animals, the camels, other animals, out of the sweet waters of Longewalla, which they wanted. So enemy thought it was a minefield. So enemy tanks stopped there. And that helped the major and his men to shoot down 2 tanks with the recoilless gun, RCLs, as they're known as. Throughout the night, the men battled it down from the trenches, kept the enemy at bay. A company versus a brigade and tanks, of course, and then nothing. And in those days, Indian Air Force did not have planes with night flying equipment to take on the tanks or to take on the enemy for that matter. So these men had to hold on the whole night, and this is what they held on: the barbed wire, the motivation talk, the 2 RCLs, the mortars, the ammunition, and sheer willpower, led as a role model by Major Chandrapur. They held on to that night, did not let the enemy pass through, and as soon as there was a hint of a sun in the sky, the Indian Air Force hunters took off, and they went trigger happy at the tanks. 37 tanks went down at Longewalla. But the credit to stopping the enemy there goes totally to now Brigadier Chandrapur and his men. Sheer grit, absolute grit is the word, grit and willpower. That they will not let through, and they did not. So thank you very much. Embrace the twist. to enjoy the turn. Bye bye.